Fred Claus. Four Christmases.
Well, it wouldn't be December on the Blockbuster show if we didn't talk about some terrible Christmas comedies, and boy howdy, we're in for a double feature today. We're talking about Fred Claus and Four Christmases, and both movies have a theme. They both have Vince Vaughn, as if talking about him and the dilemma and the internship wasn't bad enough. Now, before we talk about both movies, I just wanted to highlight this thing that I've noticed going back and rewatching a bunch of Christmas movies from the 2000s. There was this horrible trend where, for some reason, we just got the shittiest, most cynical Christmas movies of all time. I mean, yeah, we had a couple of good ones, like Elf came out, and there was a couple of other ones in between, but otherwise, really shitty Christmas comedies from the 2000s, they always had the same problem. They would always try to present themselves as wacky screwball comedies, but they also had this, like, cynical edge to them, but it felt incredibly disconnected. I talked about this problem last year with Deck the Halls, and there's just a bunch of movies that fall into this category as well. You got these two movies, you got Christmas with the Cranks is one of the most notorious examples of that. Surviving Christmas with Ben Affleck, that movie's fucking terrible. I'd probably say that's one of my least favorite examples of these kind of movies, but, you know, these two movies here, while they're probably not the worst, my god, I didn't like either of these movies. We're going to start with Fred Claus, because that came out just a year before Four Christmases. It came out in 2007, and Four Christmases was 2008. So we're going to talk about Fred Claus, and much like Christmas with the Cranks, this movie is apparently based on a book, and they decided to flesh it out into an almost 2-hour comedy. Because that was totally one of the saving graces of New Year's Eve, the fact that it went on for way too long. But out of these two movies, I'll say this, Fred Claus has a kind of interesting premise, in that, you know, Santa Claus has a loser brother who is played by Vince Vaughn, and Paul Giamatti plays Santa, and for what it's worth, that casting is not too terrible. In fact, there's a lot of good actors in here. Like, you get to see Santa's parents, and the mom is played by Kathy Bates, and even though she doesn't really do a whole lot in the movie, you know, Kathy Bates, she's a classical actress. She's clearly trying. Anyway, the movie begins in a very, very long time ago, and we see the birth of Santa Claus, or Nick, as a play off of Saint Nick. It's clever, of course. And it basically becomes a sibling rivalry. You know, Fred, who's like, I don't know, 7 years older, I guess, is trying to be a good older brother, but his life basically gets ruined because he just has a perfect goody two-shoes, way too nice younger brother, and the parents are always comparing them and being like, oh, Fred, why can't you be more like your little brother?
Door's locked, so I decided to drop down the chimney. What fun!
Nicholas.
The door locked, why didn't you just knock?
Because he's inventive.
Well, not to mention, in the opening, when we see the birth of Santa, we have this really uncanny valley baby that they use. It's like a CG effect, and it looks so fucking disconcerting.
Ho,
Who? What did he say?
ho, ho.
He's perfect in every way.
It looks so fucking bad. But anyway, yeah, jump forward in time, and Santa ends up becoming Santa. He's a saint, and going by this movie's definition of a saint, and, you know, there's magic involved, and you basically get magical abilities, which explains all the stuff at the North Pole and whatnot. Basically, if you become a saint by this movie's definition, you become a Highlander, because, you know, you don't age, and, like, people within your family don't age, which explains why Vince Vaughn is just a regular, everyday, aged man, however old he was when they made the movie. I mean, it doesn't explain the fact that, like, he's still technically aged, he's just now a fully grown adult. So does aging stop after a certain point? Like, do you have to hit, like, 40-something before it officially stops? And then from this point forward, it basically becomes your typical Vince Vaughn comedy. He's a loser, he's a slacker, he needs to get his life in order, he doesn't treat the people in his life very good, like the few friends that he might have, or his girlfriend, played by Rachel Weisz of all people.
What I'm trying to say to you is that when it gets to midnight tonight, and then it's 1 minute past midnight, tomorrow begins, and then it is my birthday.
I mean, fuck's sake, man, she's married to a James Bond in real life. How the hell do you end up as the love interest for Vince Vaughn in a movie? I mean, shit, her being with Brendan Fraser in the 2 Mummy movies makes way more sense. Like, this is like when you see, like, Selma Hayek end up as, like, the wife of Adam Sandler in one of his movies. It's like, no, I'm not buying that. That's not movie magic, man. That's fucking movie hypnosis. Fred, he's basically trying to get by on people. He goes around to street corners pretending to be a charity Santa, ringing a bell on a street corner to try and make money because he's in a shit ton of debt and he's trying to get some kind of casino off the ground so he can make a bunch of money. And this was weird. His only friend at this point in the movie is like an orphan kid that he just so happens to hang out with.
I asked Santa for a puppy this year. I'm gonna name him Macaroni, but I don't know how Santa's gonna know where to bring me my gifts this year because I don't know where I'll be on Christmas morning. Cause you know how sometimes if my grandma's sick, I end up staying over my eyes.
I mean, it does come into play at the very end of the movie, but still, that it's like, really? You couldn't give him some grown-ass adult friends? Like, he has to be... I guess it's to try and show that he's not completely a bad guy. He looks out after a kid who doesn't have any parents, so despite his cold-hearted asshole exterior, he does have a heart underneath. It's, I guess, something to that effect. So Fred gets extremely desperate for money, so he, of course, goes to his brother and is like, hey, can you give me a certain amount of money? And being Santa Claus, he says, yeah, sure, I can give you that money. But he gives him the caveat that he has to come and spend Christmas with him and his family because they haven't seen each other in a while. So he decides to go to the North Pole, and he is brought along by one of the elves in the movie, played by poor John Michael Higgins. I mean, even in bad movies, he's generally pretty funny. And, I mean, he's trying. Like, everybody in this movie, they're not giving off horrible performances. I mean, some of them might be sleepwalking because the material's not that good. But, I mean... generally, I like John Michael Higgins, but here it's just like, all right, they didn't really give him anything to do. They give him a whole subplot, but it's not a very good one.
No, I got it. Okay.
Before we launch into the rest of the movie, I just gotta put a sidebar here and say, the effects that they do, where you have little people actors, and then they superimpose these actors' faces onto these bodies, it is so disconcerting looking. It looks horrible. And that's especially prevalent with one character who really doesn't need to be in the movie, but they just put him in because I guess Ludacris needed money. That you have an elf in there who's a DJ, so you have Ludacris as this elf, and it's like, it's so fucking freaky looking.
It would be a really nice gesture on your part to play something different.
I said no.
Donnie, change the song.
No.
Change the song.
No.
You know what? I'm gonna change the song then for you. What are you getting physical with me for? Music's supposed to be about love. Don't get physical with me.
It's like some shit out of that terrible Wayans Brothers movie, Little Man. It's like, what the fuck is that? That is so creepy looking. But anyway, yeah, John Michael Higgins' whole subplot is... He's in love with this one lady who works at the North Pole, played by Elizabeth Banks, and she doesn't know he exists, and he has confidence issues, and you know, ultimately at the end of the movie that they're going to fall in love, they're going to get together. There's a part where he finally kisses her and he has to grab a stool because he's an elf and he's really small, and then he gets up to her height and he kisses her, and then they fall in love, and who gives a shit? Once Fred gets to the North Pole, we then get the typical stupid slapstick shenanigans you'd expect from a movie like this, like, haha, elf security just jump him, so it's like three little people jumping up and taking down Vince Vaughn. Isn't that so funny? It was at this point in the movie where it's like, okay, it's supposed to be a dysfunctional family coming together at Christmas type movie, but the joke is, haha, it's Santa Claus and his family. And you know what? Maybe this could work as like a sketch, but making it into a full movie, I feel like this probably would have worked more if they actually treated it 100% seriously. I mean, that's generally the appeal of movies like Airplane and Naked Gun, is that all the stuff in the movie that's happening is so silly, but the reason it's funny is because everyone treats it so seriously. Everyone's still stoic and treats it like it's a regular action movie or something like that, or a police drama. That's what makes it funny, is that the weird, stupid shit going on around them is treated completely straight. Though, now that I think about it, I say that, but there's a part in the movie where they sit down and have an intervention, and it is so horribly uncomfortable, and it feels just a little too real.
It's affecting his health, not to mention other aspects of our marriage.
Oh, ho, and that.
So Santa's having a tough time getting the sleigh off the ground, huh?
Ding.
Shit, man, there are people who are actually facing this kind of shit in real life. So, you know, the fact that this comedy has moments where, oh, Vince Vaughn is making stupid puns with a bunch of elves, and, you know, there's parts where people get hit on the head with snowballs, or people fucking fight each other in the snow. It's like, you know, that part was just way too uncomfortable for my taste. While all of this is going on, you also have a subplot where Santa is worried about his business because they have an efficiency expert, uncomfortably enough played by Kevin Spacey. He says that they sent him, and who they is just some like undisclosed board that we never see. I mean, it's the joke that people have done for years of like, oh, haha, they're treating the North Pole like some kind of bureaucracy where there's, you know, inner office politics and whatnot. And it's like, you know, I've seen it so many times, it's not even that funny. It was at this point in the movie where I'm like, you know, between the whole, oh, family coming to visit at the North Pole, and now you got like this whole fairy tale or folklore or holiday council going on, I'm like, shit, dude, this is like a worse version of the Santa Claus sequels with Tim Allen. And that's saying something because the Santa Claus sequels were already not that good to begin with. But every once in a while, Kevin Spacey pops in and out just to be like, you know, oh, you guys better clean up your shit because you guys are already on strike one. And if you get 3 strikes, then you're done. You know, I already canceled the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy, and you guys are next.
But it's not just you. We're putting the Tooth Fairy on a one-child, one-tooth system. I mean, look, you lose your first tooth, fine, get a buck, put it under the pillow, but then get on with your life. I mean, really, it's getting a bit, don't you think? Oh, and also, we're going to dump the Easter Bunny. It just doesn't make any sense anymore. I mean, Easter and bunnies and eggs and all that, I mean, it just, where's the synergy?
Like I said, he pops up every once in a while. There's a part near the third act where, of course, you have to have the falling out where Fred and Nick end up fighting in the snow and they hate each other. But you know they're going to get together because something is going to bring them together. Possibly on Christmas Eve because it's a Christmas movie. And, of course, all the big events that happen on Christmas Eve end up making the plot come together at the end. I will say this, though. There's one actually kind of funny part, because it felt like something they shot for the trailer, and then they thought, you know what, that's actually kind of funny. Let's put it in the movie for real. You have what's basically like an AA meeting, but instead it's for brothers who are in the shadow of much more famous, wealthy, successful people.
When Rocky III came out, I was starting to wonder who Frank Stallone was, you know? It was like identity theft. So you're fighting Rambo, you're fighting Rocky, and trying to keep them at bay so you can get a little bit of you to come through.
When we left the White House, I thought that it was going to be the first step on the road to recovery. But no, I started to cry again. And I just don't know if I'm ever, going to be able to fully recover now.
It's not that it's even particularly laugh out loud funny or anything like that, but I don't know. It felt like an old 90s SNL sketch where they actually got a bunch of the people to show up and play themselves, and everyone was a good sport about it. So you know what? If anything, that was the one funny part. I was like, all right, that's genuinely funny. Near the end of the movie, Santa ends up throwing his back out. He needs Fred to help him, and Fred, having a change of heart, wants to be a good brother, so he decides that he will go around the world and deliver all the presents. And even though there's a ticking clock element, like, oh no, he's not going to be able to deliver all the presents. And evil Kevin Spacey shows up just to shut them down because he's a spiteful son of a bitch. And then they reveal, like in every single Christmas movie, the reason he hates Santa and hates Christmas is because he never got what he wanted as a kid. But then Santa shows him some kindness and gives him what he's always wanted, which is a Superman cape. I don't know if that was intentional. I mean, it is a Warner Brothers movie, so if it was intentional that like, hey, we got Kevin Spacey just so we can make the joke of, oh, he wanted something Superman related and he once played Lex Luthor in Superman Returns. Again, not particularly funny, but you know what? For what it's worth, I was like, all right, well played. I see what you did there. And of course, Fred delivers all the presents. Him and his brother finally make up. It seems like their family are finally on good terms. He decides to be a better boyfriend to Rachel Weisz. I guess he ends up opening up the casino. Oh, and they pay off the thing with the orphan kid because he gives him something that he's always wanted, and then the kid gives Fred back his wallet. So there's the joke of that.
Santa?
Yeah.
Here's your wallet back.
That's a good start. Let's try and build some real momentum with that, okay?
That's the other thing I gotta bring up. This movie has this underlying message of there's no such thing as bad kids. You just gotta give kids a chance. Here's the problem with that. There's a scene where, of course, this is like in the middle of the movie where it shows how much of a fuck up Fred is. And Santa puts him in charge of, deciphering who's naughty and who's nice and who's gonna be on which list. And Fred is looking at all the kids of the world, and it shows a kid like harassing his sister. He's pulling her hair and like chasing her around with a wiffle ball bat.
Oh, boy. Okay, that seems pretty cut and dried. One moment, I don't know what's happening. What we don't know what happens.
And he says something along the lines of like, well, we don't know the full context of that. You know, maybe the kid was just having a bad day. There's no such thing as a bad kid. So yeah, I'm going to put him on the nice list. And of course, yeah, he decides to just put everybody on the nice list because he's a lazy schlub and doesn't give a shit at this point in the story. First of all, I gotta point out, didn't they do something similar in Bruce Almighty? Wasn't that the whole thing that like Jim Carrey basically gave everybody what they wanted and then the world went to hell? I couldn't help but get reminded of that, probably because I was trying to think of something better I could be watching. But secondly, and more importantly, I hate that lesson of like, oh, well, you don't know the full context of that. Maybe that kid was having a bad day. There's no such thing as bad kids. And it's like, really? The kid chasing his sister around with a blunt object? It doesn't even make sense how they tried to connect the whole thing together. It's, I guess it's to be like, oh, well, you know, Fred, he's not such a bad guy. He was just misunderstood because his parents always compared him to his brother and never looked at him as his own person or whatever. And it's just like, I don't know how you get that, because they showed that Fred as a kid isn't even really a bad kid. Like, he wasn't chasing after his brother and trying to get him hurt all the time like that fucking nutjob kid in the middle of the movie. So it's like, I don't know where that fucking lesson comes from. I mean, yeah, the typical family lesson of like, oh, blood is thicker than water, and, you know, during the holidays, you know, everyone should come together and put petty differences aside. I get that. But that whole, oh, there's no such thing as bad kids, and then showing this deranged kid chasing after his sister with a weapon, it's like, I beg to fucking differ.
Oh, families together again. Fun, fun, fun.
Done with that. Now let's move on to the second movie, Four Christmases, which falls into one of my least favorite categories of film of all time, and that's rom-coms. Specifically bad rom-coms. I cannot stand bad rom-coms. If you've kept up with Blockbuster show, you probably know that already. But this definitely falls into that category. I really hated this movie. In comparison, I wouldn't really say that Fred Claus was a good movie, but Fred Claus at least had an interesting premise. It was way more interesting than this shit, because this is one of those bad rom-coms where it feels like a bad Chuck Lorre sitcom. Right out of the gate, I just gotta point out, how weird of a team-up is this? Like, this is such a weird pairing for an on-screen couple. You have Vince Vaughn and Reese Witherspoon, who, I mean, first of all, they have no chemistry whatsoever. And then when I looked into the movie, I found out they apparently clashed on set a lot and they didn't get along. Like, you could totally tell, because they have no chemistry whatsoever. And they're supposed to be the two main leads of this thing. On top of that, I mean, it's just such a weird pairing. I mean, Reese Witherspoon, I'll always just see her as her character from Legally Blonde. You know, she did that character well, and that's what I'll always remember her for. And fucking Vince Vaughn, I just imagine as like someone's dad who wants to occasionally watch the Chicago Bulls game with his friends and just BS around. Like, why would you put those two together in a movie? It makes no sense. Okay, as for the plot of the thing, well, they're the perfect couple. They apparently love each other so much. The movie straight up begins with them doing this weird role play scenario where they're at some fancy restaurant and he goes up and asks her out, but she rejects him, and then he basically calls her a slut in front of everybody.
You sure can talk the talk, you crazy little slut. But can you deliver the goodies? I don't give a damn about Connecticut. I hate those cheap earrings. I'm from North Dakota, and this is how we handle our business in the Bison State, Mama.
And then the movie tries to pull a fast one on you, like, oh, you know, what a horrible way to start. You know, oh, these people, they don't like each other at all. And then they both walk out together, and it turns out that it was just some role play fetish shit that they were doing.
This is where you live?
This is where you live too, honey. Come on.
Yeah, they're apparently the perfect couple. They really love each other. They go to like dance lessons together, and then for some reason the people, like, they're not even supposed to be their friends, at least I don't think so, but it's just people that they were in the class with. They're like, you guys are such the perfect couple, oh, when are you guys gonna get married and have kids? And they're like, oh, we don't want to do that. And they're like, what? They're like all offended by it.
We're not getting married.
Oh. So why are you taking dance classes?
We do a lot of stuff together. That's just
Oh,
one
yeah.
of many things that we do together.
Yeah, it's fun.
In fact, I can't think of anything that we don't do together.
Right, so why wouldn't you want to get married?
Also, I want to point out, there's a scene where they're discussing their vacation plans to a couple of friends of theirs, And I couldn't help but notice they were played by some TV actors I recognized. One of them is Kevin from The Office, and the other one is Jonesy from Reno 911.
What are you guys doing for Christmas?
We got the entire family flying in. 13 airport pickups. 4 days of listening to how gifted my nieces are.
I'm vacationing in tropical Albany this year with Trish's family. They got us a cot, which is awesome, but we'll probably end up sleeping on the musty couch in the basement with the cats.
We're only in it for one scene, and, you know, maybe it's just because I've been watching those shows a lot lately, but I couldn't help but just be like, oh, look, it's Kevin and Jonesy. That's something. So they established one of the reasons these two got together was because they both came from divorced families. So they every December, they try to avoid their family as much as possible because they don't want to have to interact with them. And it was at this moment it reminded me of this old Seinfeld bit where George said something about he didn't want his parents to get divorced because then that means he has to visit them twice and it'd be like 2 Thanksgivings.
If they get divorced and live in 2 separate places, that's twice as many visits.
I never thought of that.
Imagine if I had to see them both on the same day. It's like running a double marathon.
Again, I feel like this was just my brain's way of trying to remind me of something that I'd rather be watching instead. They decide they're going to go to the Bahamas or somewhere tropical. It's a nice little vacation, a little getaway for Christmas. They get to the airport and their flight can't take off because there's a really bad fog. So they're not going to be able to.
Oh, where are you headed for this Christmas? You certainly look dressed for vacation.
Then this news team that I guess is reporting all of this shows up and they're just like, hey, what do you people think of the fog going on? They're seen on the TV, and then all 4 of their families call them up and are like, what, you're not going to stop by and see us? You're going to try and, you know, go on vacation for Christmas instead of spending time with your families? It's the holidays, don't you know? So then they decide, all right, well, we haven't met each other's families, so maybe this can help strengthen our relationship. So let's just knock these out one at a time. And conveniently, they all just so happen to live in the exact same state. None of them moved out or anything, so that way they can stay in San Fran and they can just drive around and meet each one of their families, and you get some really awkward, I can't believe it's not Meet the Parents style comedy here.
I had no idea you could milk a cat.
Oh yeah, you can milk anything with nipples. I have nipples, Greg. Could you milk me?
So Vince Vaughn's dad is like this white trash kind of guy, and his brothers still live with him, and they're like wannabe backyard wrestlers, and they're constantly beating the shit out of Vince Vaughn, and the dad just like watches and laughs and acts like it's nothing.
Are you crazy? Bro. Hey, buddy.
Ow! 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 And it's here where the movie's tone is really confused. It's like, okay, are we supposed to be laughing at how this family is really negligent at the fact that they're just treating, you know, physical assault like, oh yeah, that's just typical roughhousing, huh, yeah. Or is it supposed to be funny because you want to see Vince Vaughn get the shit beat out of him? Like, it feels like they don't really know what the tone is supposed to be. It's like, and then there's just stupid jokes that don't make any sense. Like, Vince Vaughn tries to be like a good uncle because he gets his nephew an Xbox, and then they give him shit about like, oh, there's a certain like money limit to how much you spend for a gift, and it's like, you didn't fucking tell him that.
How in the hell did you find an Xbox for under $10? Looks like somebody's trying to show off how much money he makes.
Yeah.
Or maybe someone's family didn't tell him that there was a $10 spending cap.
Also gotta throw out, in one of the many cameos you're gonna get in this thing, the brothers were played by Tim McGraw and Jon Favreau. Yeah, I know, Jon Favreau being in a movie with Vince Vaughn. Can you believe it? What is this, Bizarro World?
It's me, you must be Orlando's girl.
Then you get to Vince Vaughn's mom, who's like this hippie chick, and she's now going out with one of his old high school friends. And there's just the really weird, awkward banter back and forth where the friend is like, yeah, you can call me dad if you want to. And then Vince Vaughn's like, I'm not going to do that because I sat next to you in English class or math class or whatever he says.
I'm just hoping for a chance to be your friend.
You were my friend, Daryl. You were my best friend. We grew up together. We rode bikes together. We used to smell each other's hands. But now you're sleeping with my mom, and it's a little bit weird for me. Can you appreciate that?
I know what you want about the Meet the Parents movies. The first one at least had charm. I mean, this is just so fucking awkward, and all it's missing is that Chuck Lorre laugh track. And you get Reese Witherspoon's mom, and she lives in what they call a cougar den, because you have like a bunch of, you know, sexualized older women like hanging around the house, and they also have a bunch of kids and shit running around. And again, with the weird, awkward comedy, You get an old lady talking about how for Christmas she wants to learn how to pleasure her man.
I could increase the frequency with which I pleasure Milt with my hand and with my mouth.
Oh my god. Oh, and then you get some bad fucking physical comedy too, because you have it that Reese Witherspoon, I guess as a little kid, had a bad experience with a bouncy castle, so she has to go into a bouncy castle at one point, and, you know, she stares at it like she's going through Nom flashbacks. She goes into the bouncy castle and she falls around a lot, and then a bunch of kids start tackling her. Again, is the joke supposed to be, haha, Reese Witherspoon's getting tackled by a bunch of kids? Or is it supposed to be like, oh, haha, how absurd, a grown woman getting taken down in a bouncy castle by a bunch of snot-nosed little shits? I mean, there's a reason that movies from Troma have a charm and have an audience, because they're super unapologetic and they know they're fucked up. This movie feels like it's trying to be just a regular, middle-of-the-road, average Christmas movie that everybody can watch and laugh at, but not only is it unfunny, but it's incredibly awkward, and it's like, when it tries to be a little bit more on the cutting edge, it's just so misanthropic. As the movie progresses, they try to show that, like, their supposedly perfect relationship has cracks in it, because, like, there's stuff they haven't told each other. Vince Vaughn never told her that his original birth name was Orlando.
Orlando?
I mean, we're named after the cities in which we were conceived. I'm Denver, that's Dallas, and this is Orlando.
And she was once chubby when she was a little girl.
Pound a month.
Courtney.
And neither of these things are particularly scandalous. I mean, again, going back to the Meet the Parents comparison, Ben Stiller's girlfriend never told him that, you know, her ex-boyfriend, Owen Wilson, was also once her fiance. Like, that's stuff that's like, yeah, you probably should tell a person that you're with that you were about to get married to someone. These two things here, who gives a shit? These aren't fucking things that are gonna make or break a relationship. Oh, and then this results in the fucking forced third act conflict for this movie, because it turns out that Reese Witherspoon is pregnant. And, you know, she's talking about, you know, she's finally starting to think maybe she does want to get married and have kids. But Vince Vaughn, the more this plays out, is thinking about distancing himself from her for some reason, because the movie needs conflict. So the final family they go to is her dad, played by Jon Voight, who's probably the most normal person in the movie, which is incredibly ironic because he's Jon Voight.
I may not understand your language, but I know what you're thinking. Stay out of my way, Runt, or else.
But then Jon Voight gives this whole speech about, like, oh, you know, blood is thicker than water, and, you know, he wishes he could do things over, and that he stayed with her and her mother, and, you know, he wishes that things could have been differently, and he doesn't want her to make the same mistakes that they did. And it's just, it's that forced fake sentimentality to try and make you think the movie has a heart, when really it just feels like typical Christmas schmaltz. It's like, oh, this is a Christmas movie, and we got to have a message about family and being there for your family and how family is so important.
And I'll tell you, honey, I would give anything to have that time back again.
I would too.
Honestly, after watching this movie and seeing these families and how fucked up they are, it's like, this isn't like the occasional dysfunction and, you know, stupid BS that you have with your parents. These are the kind of people where it's like, if this is your family, I could see why you wouldn't want to spend time with them. These people are fucked up. There's no reason you should have to spend Christmas with them every year, even if they are your family. And yeah, I get it. Every once in a while, families have arguments or disagreements, and, you know, things can be a little bit stressful. You know, a lot of families are like that, of course. But like I said, if they're like the families in this movie, and these families eat a bag of dicks like these people do, it's no wonder they tried to get away from them at the beginning of the movie. They wanted to go off to the Bahamas. They clearly like spending time with each other. So what's wrong with that? What's wrong with them just being together and not being around these fucking insane people that feel like they're out of a fucking insane asylum? But of course, they end up getting back together. Vince Vaughn and her end up getting married, and they have the baby. And then, oh, the movie ends on a gag, because even though the whole message was, oh, they need to spend more time with their families, even though they're insane, they need to spend more time with their family and, you know, tell them stuff and keep them in the know and have them more in their lives. But then the movie ends with a gag where I guess they didn't really learn anything, because that same news crew shows up and reports how they're the first birth of the year in the city or whatever.
And then there was stretching and the the juices.
What he's trying to say is that we're just beyond words excited. Oh. Oh, goodness.
As if it isn't obvious already, I really hated Four Christmases. I mean, like, I already don't like bad rom-coms, but oh my god, this takes the cake. This is one of the worst Christmas rom-coms I've ever seen in a while. The cast is completely wasted. You have a lot of really talented actors in this movie, and they're just given the worst material ever. And I would say that Vince Vaughn and Reese Witherspoon, they try, but I mean, they had no chemistry whatsoever. And you could really tell that they didn't like being around each other. I hate the message of the movie. I really hate that whole, like, oh, these people are absolutely fucked up and insane and you would not want to be around them at all. But, oh, you're supposed to be around them because blood is thicker than water. It's like, you know what? Sometimes blood is not thick enough, to risk your own mental health. If your family are this fucked up, you don't have to be around them. And yeah, they totally should have just gone on vacation because then they'd at least be closer to each other. In comparison, Fred Claus, it's not a very good movie, but compared to Four Christmases, I mean, there was a few parts that I at least laughed at. I thought the movie had an interesting premise, and I feel like if they handled it better, they probably could have done something with it. The opening I thought was okay, and I thought the ending was fine, and there's a couple parts in between that I laughed at, but otherwise, Fred Claus, it just feels like a really desperate attempt to try and make the next The Santa Claus with Tim Allen or something like that. And like I said, the sequels to those I didn't really particularly care for, but shit, man. The most glowing praise I could give Fred Claus is that at least it isn't Four Christmases. That's all I'm going to say. That's really what it comes down to. Holy hell. You know what? Next time we're going to be talking about something that is actually funny. Not intentionally so, but something that actually is pretty funny. We're going to be talking about the He-Man and She-Ra Christmas special. Oh, that's going to be so stupid, but I know for a fact I'm going to love it just based on how fucking bad it is. But anyway, gotta wash the taste of these bad movies out of my mouth. God. Anyway, yeah. Tune in next time, guys. Until then, I'm Adam Sykes of the Blockbuster Show, and we will see you guys in the next video.
Away from me. I'm sorry, I love you. You gotta get out of here. I can't breathe. I want to do it too!